I never thought I'd find myself writing something like this, but here I am. I guess I need advice or maybe just an outlet because my life has taken a turn I never saw coming. My name is Michael, I'm 36, and my wife, Julia, is 34. We've been married for 10 years. Or at least I thought we were married in the real sense of the word. For most of our marriage, Julia was a teacher. A good one, too. She always talked about how much she loved shaping young minds, and I believed her. But about 6 months ago, everything started changing. She got a new job at a private academy in a more affluent part of the city. It was one of those places where the parents drive Bentleys, and the tuition costs more than my entire annual salary as an IT specialist. She was thrilled at first, saying it was a big step up for her career. And honestly, I was happy for her. The first few months seemed normal, but then Julia started changing. At first, it was subtle. New designer clothes she said she got on sale. Perfume that smelled like it belonged on someone headed to a black-tie gala, not the classroom. Then it became more obvious. Dinners she couldn't miss with parents from the school, weekends helping out at exclusive charity events, and always coming home late with excuses that felt thinner and thinner. I brought it up once, jokingly. How come I never get invited to these swanky events? She laughed and said, Michael, you wouldn't enjoy them. It's all rich people bragging about their vacation homes and yachts. She made it sound so tedious, but there was this glimmer in her eye whenever she talked about them. Like she loved it. I tried to shake it off, but my gut wouldn't let me. It was little things that kept adding up. The way she'd put her phone face down at dinner, the way she'd dress up even more than usual, and the strange tension in her voice whenever I asked how her day went. She told me everything was fine, of course, that I was overthinking things. Then one night, Julia came home with a diamond bracelet. I'll never forget the way it caught the light in the kitchen. It was massive, something you'd see in a magazine, not on the wrist of a teacher. Where did that come from? I asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, one of the parents gave it to me, she said, brushing it off like it was no big deal. They appreciated me helping their daughter with her college essays. It's nothing. Nothing. A diamond bracelet was nothing? That was when the alarms in my head really started blaring. I couldn't get the bracelet out of my head. Who gives a teacher a diamond bracelet as a thank you gift? And why was Julia so nonchalant about it? It didn't sit right with me. But whenever I tried to bring it up again, she'd brush me off. You're overreacting, Michael, she'd say with an annoyed sigh. It's not like I asked for it. Rich people just do things like that. Still, her explanation didn't add up. We'd been married for a decade, and I knew her, or at least I thought I did. Julia used to roll her eyes at people who flaunted their wealth. Now, she was coming home giddy about meeting parents who owned private jets. Things escalated when her late nights started becoming more frequent. She'd text me things like, "Don't wait up, long dinner tonight," or "The fundraiser is running late." First, I bought it. Teachers at that kind of school probably have to put in extra effort with the high-maintenance parents. But then there were weekends when she'd disappear for hours, claiming she was volunteering at events. And when she came home, she wouldn't tell me much about what happened, just vague, dismissive comments. The turning point came when I found a receipt in the laundry. It wasn't just any receipt. It was from a luxury boutique downtown, one of those places where the cheapest thing in the store costs more than our monthly mortgage payment. The receipt was for a silk tie and a pair of cufflinks. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at it. I hadn't been given any fancy gifts, and I sure didn't wear silk ties. So who were they for? When Julia came home that night, I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to believe me, but something told me I needed more. I needed proof. If I accused her without anything concrete, she'd just twist it around. She was good at that, making me feel like the crazy one. Instead, I played it cool. How was the fundraiser? I asked as she breezed into the living room, still dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her in all the right places. Exhausting, she said, kicking off her heels and pouring herself a glass of wine. These people have too much money and too much ego. It's exhausting keeping up with their conversations. I nodded, pretending to sympathize, but inside I was boiling. Her stories didn't match up anymore. The woman who was exhausted by these people also came home glowing after every event. Something wasn't right. That night, while she showered, I did something I'd never done before. I opened her phone. It was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode, our anniversary date. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her messages. Most were innocent. Texts with her sister, coworkers, friends. But then I saw one thread that made my blood run cold. It was saved under the name B. The messages were intimate, not in an outright sexual way, but in a way that left no doubt in my mind. Can't wait to see you tonight. You looked stunning yesterday, as always. Thinking of you. And then there was this. The bracelet looked perfect on you. I knew it would. I put the phone down, my chest tight. The diamond bracelet wasn't a thank you gift from a parent. It was from him. Whoever B was, he wasn't just someone she met at work. He was someone she was seeing. Someone she was with. I sat in the dark, staring at the phone. I wanted to scream, to storm into the bathroom and confront her right then and there. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I needed to know exactly who B was. The next morning, Julia left early for another work obligation. I kissed her goodbye like nothing was wrong, but my mind was racing. As soon as she was out the door, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. I began with her phone's messages. Specifically, B. I copied his number from the chat and ran a reverse lookup online. The name that popped up sent a chill through me. Benjamin Carlisle. If you live anywhere near our city, you know that name. Carlisle was a billionaire, the kind of guy whose face is always in the papers for his flashy donations to museums, charity galas, and political campaigns. He owned half the skyscrapers downtown and was notorious for his excessive lifestyle. Private jets, yachts, women. This guy? My wife was involved with this guy. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad soap opera. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces started falling into place. The late nights, the fancy events, the expensive gifts. She wasn't volunteering or networking with parents. She was seeing him. Still, I needed more proof. Something concrete. Something undeniable. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a private investigator. The guy I hired, Mark, was a no-nonsense type. "You're not the first husband to call me about a situation like this," he said when we met at a diner that afternoon. I gave him all the details I had. The texts, the receipts, the weird behavior. He listened without judgment, jotting everything down. "Give me a week," he said. "I'll find out what's going on." That week was hell. Julia kept up her usual routine, and I played the role of the clueless husband. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was meeting him. Every time her phone buzzed, I wondered if it was him. Mark sent me updates every couple of days. He was good at his job, too good, honestly. He followed Julia to a luxury hotel downtown, where Carlisle was staying for the month. He got photos of her entering the hotel in the evening and leaving hours later, her hair a mess and her makeup smudged. When I saw the pictures, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. There she was, my wife, sneaking around with a man who could buy and sell our entire neighborhood without blinking. And the way she looked, happy, radiant, alive. It was a knife to the heart. She hadn't looked at me like that in years. But the most damning evidence came in the form of a video. Mark managed to get footage of Julia and Carlisle together at one of his charity galas. In the video, they were standing close, laughing, touching. At one point, he leaned in and kissed her, right there in the middle of the room. I didn't know whether to rage or break down. The man wasn't just rich, he was untouchable, powerful. And my wife was part of his world now, a world I didn't belong to and never would. But I wasn't about to let them get away with this. Couldn't. When I saw the video, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the way she looked at him, like he was the center of her universe. The way she laughed, the way she smiled. I couldn't stop replaying it, torturing myself with every frame. By the time Julia came home that evening, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them now. She walked through the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, holding a shopping bag from yet another high-end store. "Hey, Michael," she said casually. not even looking up. "Julia," I said, my voice cold and steady. "We need to talk." She stopped, her smile faltering as she looked at me. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone. The video paused on the part where Carlisle kissed her. "This," I said. Her face went pale. For a moment, she said nothing, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Then, she tried to laugh it off. "Michael, what is this? Where did you even—" "Don't lie to me," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Don't you dare lie to me, Julia. I know everything. The hotel. The texts. Him." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely scared. "Michael, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I shot back, my hands trembling with anger. "Explain how you've been sneaking around with Benjamin Carlisle? How you've been lying to my face for months? Go ahead, Julia. I'm all ears." She hesitated, and then her expression hardened. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "Yes, I've been seeing him. But you don't understand, Michael. It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been sleeping with another man, Julia. What else am I supposed to think?" "It's not just about sex," she snapped. He makes me feel alive. He appreciates me in a way you never did." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I never appreciated you?" I said, my voice breaking. "I've spent 10 years building a life with you, Julia. I've supported you through everything. I've loved you, and this is how you repay me." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "But, Michael, look at our life. It's boring. You're content to live the same routine every day. But I'm not. I needed more." "More," I repeated, shaking my head. "So you found more in the arms of a billionaire? Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed us, Julia." "I didn't destroy us," she shot back, her voice rising. "We've been broken for years, Michael. You just refused to see it." The room fell silent after that, the weight of her words hanging between us. I stared at her, trying to find the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was a stranger. "Get out," I finally said, my voice cold and firm. "What?" she whispered, her tears falling harder now. I said, "Get out," I repeated. "Go to him. If he's everything you need, then go. But don't come back here." She stood there for a moment, like she was about to argue, but then she turned and walked to the bedroom. I heard her packing a bag, and minutes later, she was gone. When the door closed behind her, the house fell into a deafening silence. For the first time in 10 years, I was alone. But as I sat there in the dark, something inside me shifted. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. After Julia left, I sat in the silence of our empty house, my mind spinning. The anger, the betrayal, it was too much. I couldn't sleep that night, couldn't eat. All I could think about was her and him, Benjamin Carlisle, the billionaire who had waltzed into my life and stolen my wife. I'll be honest, I wanted to hurt him, both of them, but not in some stupid, reckless way that would leave me with nothing. No, if I was going to do this, it had to be calculated, precise. I wanted to hit them where it hurt the most. The next morning, I called Mark, the private investigator. "I need more," I told him. "Not just photos. I need everything you can get on Benjamin Carlisle. His habits, his business dealings, his weaknesses. Whatever skeletons he's hiding, I want to know about them." Mark hesitated. "That's a tall order, Michael. Carlisle's a powerful man. Digging too deep into someone like him can be risky." "I don't care," I said, my voice firm. "Just do it. And don't hold back." He agreed, but I could hear the unease in his voice. This wasn't just another cheating spouse case anymore. It was something bigger, and we both knew it. While Mark got to work, I started doing some digging of my own. I spent hours online researching Carlisle, his companies, his investments. The man was a walking empire, but the more I read, the more I started to see the cracks in his polished image. He had a history of exploiting smaller businesses, crushing them under shady deals and aggressive buyouts. There were rumors of tax evasion, lawsuits that had mysteriously disappeared, and political bribes swept under the rug. This wasn't just a man who had taken my wife. This was a man who thought he was untouchable. And that's when I realized how I could hit him. You see, I'm not just some IT guy. I'm good at what I do, really good. Over the years, I've built security systems for companies, recovered deleted data, even traced hackers back to their source. I knew how to get into places I wasn't supposed to be, and Carlisle's world was no exception. But first, I needed access. I spent the next few days watching Julia's social media. I hated myself for it, but I needed to know where she was, who she was with. Sure enough, she started posting pictures, her at a private dinner, her at some art gallery, always in places that screamed money. Carlisle wasn't in the photos, but he didn't need to be. I knew he was there. Then came the post that sealed my plan. A charity gala at one of Carlisle's downtown properties. Julia posted about how excited she was to attend, how it was going to be an unforgettable night. She had no idea how right she was. I got to work immediately. If I was going to crash that event, I needed to look the part. I rented a suit, sharp, black, nothing flashy, and borrowed a car from a friend. It wasn't a Bentley, but it was nice enough to blend in. I knew Carlisle would have security, but I had a plan for that too. When the night of the gala arrived, I parked a few blocks away and walked to the venue. The building was as grand as I expected, all glass and steel, with a red carpet leading up to the entrance. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits filtered inside, laughing and clinking glasses. I waited until I spotted Julia. She was stunning in a silver dress, her arm looped through Carlisle's. They looked every bit the perfect power couple, and the sight of them together made my blood boil. But I swallowed my rage and stayed focused. I followed them inside, blending into the crowd. Nobody stopped me. Nobody questioned me. That's the thing about events like these. If you look like you belong, people assume you do. I kept my distance, watching as Carlisle charmed his guests, Julia by his side like a trophy. But I wasn't here to watch. I was here to act. Using the small device I'd slipped into my pocket, a portable data interceptor, I connected to Carlisle's private network. It was risky doing it right there in the middle of the gala, but I didn't have a choice. His network was locked down tight, but I knew what I was doing. Within minutes, I was in. Emails, financial records, encrypted files, they were all mine. And what I found, let's just say it was worse than I could have imagined. Sitting in the corner of the ballroom, champagne glass in hand to keep up appearances, I scrolled through the treasure trove of data I'd pulled from Benjamin Carlisle's network. The gala swirled around me. Waiters weaving through the crowd, laughter echoing off the marble walls, but I barely noticed any of it. My focus was on the screen. The first thing I found was an email chain between Carlisle and a man whose name I recognized from the news, a senator currently under investigation for corruption. The emails detailed wire transfers to offshore accounts, favors exchanged for political backing, and even explicit promises to kill legislation that would harm Carlisle's business ventures. Wow, I thought, this wasn't just dirty, it was catastrophic. But that was just the beginning. There were records of shell companies used to funnel money, contracts that bled small businesses dry, and payments marked as gifts to high-profile individuals, lawyers, accountants, even journalists. Then I stumbled upon something that made my stomach turn. A folder labeled Special Arrangements. Inside were dozens of files, each named after a different woman. Dates, expenses, and even photos were meticulously logged. It was a ledger of Carlisle's affairs, and Julia's name was right there among them. The entries under her file confirmed everything I already knew and more. The bracelet, the hotel stays, the expensive dinners. But what really broke me was the note attached to her name. Temporarily exclusive. Handle with care. Delicate ego.
Delicate ego.
Handle with care? That's what I was to her? Some placeholder for this rich scumbag while she got swept up in his world? My hands gripped the phone so tightly I thought I might crack the screen. I wanted to stand up right then and there, march over to the two of them, and blow their little fairy tale to pieces. But as I looked across the room, watching Julia hang on his arm, laughing at whatever he was saying, I realized I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. No, I was going to be smarter than that. I quickly downloaded everything, encrypting the files and sending them to a secure drive I'd set up earlier. Carlyle thought he was untouchable, but I had just become the keeper of his darkest secrets. Afterward, I slipped out of the gala unnoticed, walking through the glittering crowd like a ghost. But as I got into the car and drove away, one thought kept circling in my mind. This wasn't just about exposing Carlyle. This was about teaching both of them a lesson they'd never forget. The drive home that night felt surreal. My heart pounded in my chest, not just with anger but with the thrill of what I was about to do. Benjamin Carlyle didn't know it yet, but I had the power to bring his empire crashing down. And Julia, well, she was about to see the consequences of throwing away everything we'd built for a fleeting taste of luxury. I spent the next few days meticulously going through the files I'd stolen. There were hours of work ahead, but I thrived on the challenge. I organized every damning detail into categories: political corruption, financial fraud, personal scandals. Every time I found another smoking gun, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Carlyle wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. And soon the world would know. But I needed to be strategic. If I simply dumped everything online, he'd deny it, spin it, and bury the story with his army of lawyers and PR experts. No, I needed to control the narrative, to ensure the information landed where it would do the most damage. First, I contacted a journalist, an investigative reporter named Rachel Grant. She had a reputation for exposing powerful people, the kind of stories that toppled CEOs and sent politicians to prison. I sent her an anonymous email with a taste of the evidence. A few emails between Carlyle and the senator, some documents tying him to the shell companies. Her response came within hours. "Who are you? How did you get this? Is it legitimate?" I replied simply, "It's real, and there's more. Much more. I'll share it all, but on one condition: you take him down." She agreed. While Rachel started digging into the files I'd shared, I turned my attention to Julia. As much as I wanted to cut her out of my life completely, I couldn't let her walk away unscathed. She needed to understand what she'd done, not just to me but to herself. I decided to hit her where it would hurt the most: her reputation. I used the photos Mark had taken of Julia and Carlyle entering the hotel, paired them with screenshots of the texts I'd found, and created an anonymous social media account. I didn't post anything right away. I wasn't going to make this public just yet. But I wanted to be ready. Finally, I set up meetings with two lawyers. One to handle my divorce, and the other to ensure I couldn't be tied to any of the leaks I was planning. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about control, about showing both Julia and Carlyle that they couldn't just steamroll over people without consequences. By the end of the week, everything was in place. The files were uploaded to secure servers, the journalist was working on her exposé, and I had the means to publicly humiliate my wife if she dared to push me. The stage was set. Now it was time to pull the trigger. The day I decided to launch the first phase of my plan was cold and gray. Fitting, considering the storm I was about to unleash. Everything was ready. The files were in Rachel's hands. The social media account with Julia's photos and messages was prepped, and I had backups of every single piece of evidence stored securely. Rachel called me that morning. "Michael, this is huge," she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "If half of this checks out, and I'm already confirming a lot, it's enough to destroy him. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "He doesn't get to walk away from this. Neither of them does." She paused. "You know this might blow back on you, right? People like Carlyle don't just go quietly. He'll come after whoever did this." "Let him try," I said. "I've got nothing to lose." After the call, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. I knew that once I hit send on this next email, there'd be no turning back. But I didn't feel fear. I felt alive, focused, ready. The email was short and to the point. I attached the most damning financial records and sent it to every major news outlet in the city. I didn't use my real name, of course. The sender was listed as a concerned citizen. By noon, the first articles started popping up online. Headlines like, "Billionaire Benjamin Carlyle linked to corruption scandal," and Explosive evidence ties real estate mogul to offshore accounts. It was glorious. But I didn't stop there. I sent the same files to government watchdog groups, the IRS, and even some whistleblower organizations. I wanted the heat on Carlisle to come from every possible direction. As the news spread, I kept an eye on social media. Carlisle's name was trending within hours, and the comments were brutal. People were furious about the corruption, about the greed, about the sheer audacity of someone who thought he was above the law. I imagined him sitting in his glass-walled office, his perfect life crumbling around him. And Julia? I hoped she was watching too, realizing the man she'd thrown her lot in with wasn't untouchable after all. But I wasn't done with her yet. That evening, I logged into the anonymous account I'd created. I uploaded the photos of Julia and Carlisle at the hotel, along with screenshots of their texts. The caption read, "Billionaire's affair exposed. Married woman caught in scandal." The post spread fast, faster than I expected. People love a juicy story, and this one had it all: money, power, betrayal. By the next morning, Julia's name was being dragged through the mud online. People were calling her a gold digger, a homewrecker, a fool. It was cruel, but I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. She'd made her choices. That night, Julia called me. It was the first time I'd heard from her since she left. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling. "What did you do?" "What I had to," I replied coldly. "You've ruined me," she shouted. "People are saying horrible things about me. My job is on the line. Benjamin won't even return my calls." "Good," I said. "Now you know what it feels like to have your life ripped apart." "You're a monster," she spat. "No, Julia," I said, my voice low. "I'm the man you betrayed. And I'm just getting started." She hung up after that, but I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control again. The fallout from the exposé was swift and brutal. By the next morning, every major news outlet was running the story. Benjamin Carlisle's corruption wasn't just a headline, it was the headline. Investigative journalists were picking apart the files I'd leaked, connecting the dots to high-profile politicians, tax fraud schemes, and embezzlement on a massive scale. Carlisle tried to issue a public statement, denying everything. "This is nothing but a smear campaign," he declared at a press conference, standing in front of a gaudy gold podium. "I've done nothing wrong. My lawyers will be addressing these baseless allegations." But the evidence was too overwhelming to dismiss. By the end of the week, federal agents raided one of his offices, and his assets were frozen pending an investigation. The mighty billionaire was starting to crumble, and I relished every second of it. But I wasn't done watching. My second target, Julia, was facing her own storm. The social media post I'd uploaded with her name and pictures had gone viral. The comments were merciless. Some called her a shameless gold digger, others a pawn who got played. Screenshots of her texts with Carlisle circulated online, dissected by thousands of strangers who mocked every word. Her workplace found out too. Someone from her prestigious academy forwarded the scandal to the school board, and they launched an immediate investigation. Teachers, especially at schools like hers, were expected to maintain a certain image. Sleeping with a billionaire embroiled in corruption scandals? Not exactly the kind of image they wanted. I didn't hear from Julia again until 2 days later. When her name popped up on my phone, I let it ring a few times before answering. "What do you want?" I said flatly. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaking. "You've already said enough." "Please, Michael," she begged. I don't know what to do. They suspended me from the school. People are harassing me online. I can't even go outside without people staring. My life is falling apart." I took a slow, deep breath, letting her words settle in. "You should have thought about that before you destroyed ours." She was silent for a moment, then she whispered, "I made a mistake, Michael. I see that now. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" I snapped, cutting her off. "That actions have consequences? That running around with Carlisle would blow up in your face? Or that you'd lose everything when he tossed you aside?" "He didn't toss me aside," she said defensively. But her voice cracked, and I knew it was a lie. Then where is he now, Julia? I asked coldly. Where's your knight in shining armor while your life falls apart? She didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. You're nothing to him. Just another plaything in a long list of women he used and discarded. And now you're coming back to me hoping I'll fix this for you. But I won't, Julia. You're on your own. Michael, please? She started. But I hung up before she could finish. I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. She'd made her bed, and now she was lying in it. But I still wasn't done. Carlisle and Julia had both caused enough damage, and I wasn't going to stop until they felt every ounce of the pain they'd put me through. Julia stopped calling after that last conversation. Maybe she realized I wasn't going to save her, or maybe she was just too ashamed to face me again. Either way, I didn't care. My focus was on Carlisle now. The media storm surrounding him wasn't dying down, it was growing. Every day, new articles surfaced detailing his corruption. One particularly damning report tied him to bribes for construction permits in low-income neighborhoods, effectively forcing families out of their homes. The man wasn't just a cheater. He was a monster, and the world was finally seeing him for what he was. Rachel, the journalist I'd contacted, called me again. Michael, this thing is exploding, she said. People are coming forward, employees, former partners, even victims of his schemes. This is bigger than we thought. Good, I said. Make sure it stays that way. Oh, it will, she assured me. But listen, you should know that Carlisle's lawyers are scrambling. They're trying to trace the source of the leaks. They haven't gotten anywhere yet, but it's only a matter of time before they start making accusations. I smirked. Let them. I've covered my tracks. She paused. Even so, be careful. Men like Carlisle don't go down without a fight. I thanked her and hung up, but her words stuck with me. I'd made sure to hide my involvement, encrypting my files and using anonymous accounts, but Carlisle had money, power, and connections. If he wanted to find me, he probably could. Still, I wasn't afraid. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. He thought he was untouchable, but I was going to make sure he felt every bit as powerless as I had. That week, I took things a step further. Using the financial records I'd obtained, I flagged several transactions that linked Carlisle to international money laundering. Then, I sent the evidence to law enforcement agencies in 2 countries where his companies operated. It didn't take long for the news to break. Within days, Carlisle was facing investigations not just in the US but abroad. His empire was crumbling, piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Julia, meanwhile, had gone completely silent. I assumed she was lying low, trying to salvage what little was left of her life. But then, one evening, I got a message from Mark, the private investigator. You might want to see this, he wrote, attaching a link to a local news article. The headline read, Scandal-plagued billionaire's lover speaks out. I clicked the link, and there she was, Julia, sitting in front of a camera, tearfully telling her side of the story. It was a mistake, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I got caught up in a world I didn't understand. Benjamin made me feel special, like I mattered, but I see now that it was all a lie. He used me, just like he's used so many others. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting with a mix of anger and disgust. She wasn't taking responsibility for anything. Not the affair, not the lies, not the destruction of our marriage. Instead, she was playing the victim, hoping for sympathy. And to my horror, it was working. The comments under the video were filled with people praising her bravery, calling her strong and resilient. Some even blamed Carlisle entirely, painting her as an innocent pawn. It was infuriating. She didn't get to walk away from this as a martyr. Not after everything she'd done. I closed the article, my jaw clenched. If she wanted to paint herself as the victim, fine. I'd just have to remind everyone of the truth. Julia's interview spread quickly. People started talking about her as if she were some tragic heroine who had been duped by a billionaire's charm. It made my blood boil. I decided to counter her narrative. I still had the photos, the texts, and the timeline that showed her choices were deliberate. I reached out to Rachel, who was already deep into Carlisle's story. Send me what you have, she said. The truth deserves to come out. A few days later, Rachel published a piece titled, "The Real Story Behind the Billionaire Scandal," exposing the affair. It detailed Julia's full involvement, including her lies to me and her willingness to stay with Carlyle long after she realized who he was. Her bravery narrative fell apart instantly. Online sympathy turned into condemnation, and her name was dragged even further through the mud. I wasn't done yet. Carlyle's empire was unraveling fast. Investigations were piling up, banks were freezing his accounts, and his name was becoming synonymous with corruption. Then came the biggest blow. Rachel's latest article exposed his ties to criminal syndicates overseas. It was a direct link to money laundering and racketeering. The FBI couldn't ignore it anymore. Carlyle was arrested in a dramatic raid on one of his properties. News cameras captured him being escorted in handcuffs, his perfect life shattered for all to see. I watched the footage from my couch, a drink in hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The day Carlyle was arrested, I received a call from my lawyer. "We've filed for divorce. It's been granted. You're officially free." That was it. The final thread between me and Julia was cut. She had nothing left to hold on to. No more billionaire boyfriend, no more social status, nothing. But I still wasn't done. I knew that the wreckage of her reputation would haunt her for a long time, but I decided to remind her of the one thing she'd lost for good: me. I sent her one last message with a link to an article detailing her involvement with Carlyle. The headline read, "Teacher's Affair with Billionaire Comes to Light Amid Scandal." The final line of the article read, "Her ex-husband, Michael Thompson, declined to comment." I didn't need to say anything else. Julia was in freefall. After the article exposing her involvement, she tried to stay out of the public eye, but the damage was done. Parents at her school demanded her resignation. Her social circle vanished overnight. Carlyle's situation was even worse. With multiple lawsuits and criminal charges stacking up, his empire collapsed like a house of cards. Former associates turned on him, cutting deals to save themselves. I watched it all unfold, quietly satisfied. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. They thought they were untouchable, but I proved them wrong. Months later, my life felt lighter. The divorce was finalized, and I walked away with everything I needed to rebuild. Julia reached out once, claiming she wanted to apologize. I didn't respond. Her words meant nothing now. As for Carlyle, he was a shadow of his former self. Facing jail time, lawsuits, and public humiliation, his empire was gone. For the first time in years, I felt free. Betrayal had gutted me, but it also taught me my worth. I didn't just survive, I reclaimed my life. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, remember this: don't let them break you. There's always a way to rise above.